Awareness Week at CDC 2025. This webinar is part of Awareness Week at CDC 2025 and is a collaboration between Bono SG, the 5 CDCs, National University Singapore Faculty of Law, Singapore University of Social Sciences School of Law, Singapore Management University School of Law, the Singapore Corporate Council Association, the Singapore Association Social Workers, supported by the People's Association. I am Sangeetha and am your host for this webinar. Today's webinar is on animal welfare laws, caring for our companions. Anisa is an associate at Peter Low Chambers LLC. Prior to joining Peter Low Chambers, Anisa has had exposure to commercial litigation and criminal defense. Anisa strives to be a solution-oriented, conscientious and compassionate lawyer dedicated to delivering professional and competent legal representation. Outside of the law, her passion is horse riding. She is an avid sportswoman and enjoys arts and crafts. Anisa is also a firm proponent of contributing back to the community and she has been an active volunteer with various organizations since 2016. Let's welcome Anisa to today's panel. Walter is currently the Executive Director of SPCA and comes with many years of experience in the private, public and non-profit sectors. He has held senior technical and operational roles in multinational corporations, served in impactful positions across various government and environmental organizations, and founded his own APAC company. Walter's commitment to sustainability, the environment, and animal welfare is not only professional but also personal. Anisa and Walter, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this year's Pro Bono Legal Forum on Animal Welfare Laws and Caring for Our Companions. As someone who's up to two very different dogs, a sensitive, introspective Poodle and a very extroverted Australian Shepherd, I know firsthand how much our animal companions enrich our lives. Their personalities are as unique as any person's, and they remind us daily of the importance of empathy, responsibility, and care. In Singapore, unfortunately, we've faced in animal cruelty and vigilance. We reached 12-year high last year. This troubling trend reminds us that the way we treat animals is a reflection of our societal values and moral progress. Today, we're here not just to discuss the legal frameworks that protect animals, but also to explore the challenges, gaps, and opportunities for building a more compassionate and responsible community. Our speakers, a legal expert and a director from the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, will help us unpack the laws, share real-world cases, and discuss practical steps for both prevention and advocacy. Let's begin by looking at the key issues and questions that shape animal welfare in Singapore.
It is my aspiration that we become a more reactive society with regard to animal welfare and become a society that becomes more proactive in advocating, ensuring, and protecting animals by standing up for their rights. I want to now dive into an overall discussion on why animal welfare matters, legal, ethical, and some societal perspectives. Walter, the first question is to you. Could you share the trends in statistics reported by SPCA on animal cruelty cases over the past couple of years? And from your experience, what are the most common forms of animal cruelty or neglect that you encounter?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks to Pro Bono SG for this invitation, and thank you for the question, Sangeetha. I think the trend, the statistics is very clear. From year 2022 to 2024, we've seen a regular, constant increase, and as you said, it hit a higher in 2024. When you dive into the numbers, what we've seen is that there's a shift from direct cruelty cases to what we call welfare neglect, which is really a failure to provide and care properly for the animals. And we've seen within direct cruelty, it used to be abandonment and physical abuse, but these issues have now seen a slight dip. It hit a high in 2023, but in 2024, there's been like a 15% dip for abandonment and a 25% dip for physical abuse. What's troubling now is really a significant rise in the welfare-related reports, and specifically, in particular, dissatisfactory living conditions, which saw a 65% increase, and what we call high-rise syndrome, particularly with cats, that had a doubling from 2023 to 2024. So these are the big concerns from what our data. But then again, having said all this, the increase is not necessarily due to a worsening of conditions. There's a possibility that there's a greater community awareness, and people are more able, they understand the issues better, they recognize that, and they report even the less visible forms of suffering. And then there's also the case of the rise of social media, public education efforts, and easier reporting channels that empowers the public to quickly act on this whenever they see signs of neglect. So in that sense, the rise in the numbers could highlight a more compassionate and proactive society. So it's not necessarily a bad thing in the sense that conditions are not worsening, but clearly the data itself has shown a constant increase.
So, Walter, that's interesting that we appear to be shifting from cases of intentional cruelty, right? Intentional acts are more to neglect and inadequate welfare. In terms of absolute numbers, when you say high, would you be able to share with us raw data with regard to the number of cases for animal welfare and neglect?
So, well, at least for unsatisfactory living conditions, we've seen the numbers go from 221 cases in 2023 to 369 cases in 24.
Okay.
And in case of high-rise syndrome, it went up from 61 cases and doubled to 125 cases in 2024.
That's again, the numbers give us more perspective to understand why what's happening with regard to the proportion. So for high-rise syndrome and welfare issues, do you think the economic situation in Singapore, or what could be the potential factors contributing to this? Because it's to me apparent that these are the years post-COVID. So do you think that is contributing to animal welfare and neglect cases?
There was a spike in abandonment post-COVID.
Okay.
But like I said, abandonment as an issue has shown a slight dip in 24 from 23. The new challenges with us now with high-rise syndrome and poor living conditions are probably in living conditions, I would say they are mainly, we've seen pets confined to small unsanitary cages, poorly ventilated spaces, and sometimes tethered by short leashes. And they restrict their movements, right? So, and then in the case of animals, they lack basic shelter, food, and water. And then there are also cats falling from heights, which is really what the high-rise syndrome is about. And these are mainly due to homes without proper window meshing. And when cats, make their way out the windows, it literally leads to disabilities, or in many cases, death.
Yeah. So it seems the fraction of the problem can be handled through education and awareness. And we'll get into that towards the end of today's session. But I just wanted to touch on one point before we move on to Anisa, which is in your animal welfare neglect umbrella of cases, have you seen cases of backyard breeding in Singapore where animals are housed just for reproduction?
Well, we've seen backyard breeding case reports coming in. typically through online sales, and but the challenge really is in napping the culprits because they are done silently away in under close situations, and we can't really see and get them. And in order to prove that there is breeding legally, you've got to first prove that there is breeding,
Yep.
and as well as transaction.
Right. Thanks, Walter. So now that Walter has given us a nice inroad into the question of the legality surrounding some of these issues, Anisa, for backyard breeding, before I ask you my general question on animal welfare in Singapore, are there any specific laws surrounding breeding, or do you think it could be handled under cruelty, or is it a duty of care issue? I mean, any general thoughts on this?
At the outset, I do not think that there are any laws expressly regulating backyard breeding, but this would probably fall under animal cruelty. This is defined under the Animals and Birds Act. In simple terms, the definition of animal cruelty would mean that it is a crime to hurt or mistreat an animal in any way, for instance, by causing physical pain or causing them pain or fear, doing or omitting to do something that causes unnecessary pain and suffering to the animal, or using an animal that is sick or injured for work, and be involved in animal fights or baiting. So in the backyard breeding conditions that Walter has described, if it is unsanitary, for instance, and it does not prioritize the well-being of animal, it could very likely cause them physical pain or fear, falling under the umbrella of animal cruelty.
That's an interesting take on it. I guess it remains to be debated if we see such a case before the courts, right?
Actually, breeding is licensed in Singapore.
Right.
So there are like, I think maybe just slightly under 20 licensed breeders in Singapore. And backyard breeding, for purpose of sales, would have been illegal in that sense.
If they had a legit license.
If they wouldn't have gotten a license in their backyard, but if they bred the puppies,
Right.
or animals and they sold them, that would have been illegal, I think.
Illegal. Okay. Thank you. And we're going to dive into animal cruelty in the next section and talk in depth as to how we navigate around animal cruelty cases. But before I jump into that, just do you have any general thoughts on why animal welfare really matters in Singapore, not just in terms of laws and enforcement, but from your perspective as a dog owner, how does it reflect our societal values and ethical responsibilities?
From a non-law point of view, from an ethical and moral point of view, animals are sentient creatures, right? They are capable of feeling pain and suffering.
Yeah.
And in my point of view, compassion should extend to them beyond just humans. The animals are voiceless creatures, and it is incumbent upon us humans to protect them.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, I believe that the care that we as a society show towards these animals is a reflection of how we treat one another, especially the less fortunate in society.
Yes, absolutely. How we treat our weakest reflects our strength, our inner strength as a society. And this gives me a nice segue into talking about how we should be treating our furry creatures. And let's understand more about animal cruelty. So as Anisa aptly put it earlier, the definition of what is meant by animal cruelty is found in Section 42 of the Animal and Birds Act, 1965. So let's explore that. And Anisa gave us a quick overview earlier. And I was wondering if you could just go into more details into the elements that would make up animal cruelty. And do you think these penalties are sufficient or adequate compared to those found in our neighboring countries? For example, Australia, which is very big on animal welfare as well.
Okay, so first on the elements, it would be the definition of cruelty as I described earlier. I put it in a simpler way. So the first element would be inflicting physical pain or causing them pain or fear. An alternative definition would be doing or omitting to do something that causes unnecessary pain and suffering to the animal. Another way of defining cruelty would be using an animal that is sick or injured for work. And then fourth way and last way, it's being involved in animal fights or baiting. And even if you yourself do not do these acts, but you allow it to happen, you are still held responsible for this. As to how our penalties compare with the rest of the world, so for under the Animal and Birds Act, first-time offenders can be fined up to 15,000 and or imprisonment of up to 18 months, which is 1.5 years. And for subsequent offenders, the offender faces a fine of up to 30,000 and or imprisonment for up to 3 years. Other penalties that the authorities can impose would include disqualification from future pet ownership or an order that the animal receives mandatory treatment if this is relevant. So I took a look at the punishments in various countries, and I saw that there is a distinction between Europe, Australia versus Asia. So in UK, for instance, the maximum prison sentence for severe animal cruelty was raised to 5 years, and fines can be unlimited. But despite this high maximum, I have to caveat that many sentences are much lower and average custodial sentences are modest. And as for Australia, some states are currently proposing steep penalties. For instance, in South Australia, reforms are underway and there have been proposals for up to 10 years of imprisonment and huge fines. But if I were to contrast this with Asian countries, for example, Japan and South Korea, the penalties are much lower.
Right.
So in that case, imprisonment of up to 1 year or fine. And although animal neglect and abandonment are usually fined rather than jailed. And in countries like China, there's a lack of comprehensive animal cruelty laws.
Right. So I think we are somewhere in the middle.
Yes.
Yes, striking a balance as usual. Singapore is always the neutral, balanced jurisdiction. Are you aware of any legislative initiatives or any parliamentary proposals to further improve or rather to increase the penalties under these laws?
Right now, I'm aware that the ABA, the Animal and Birds Act, is presently undergoing review.
Okay.
This will include a review of the penalty framework under the Act. And hopefully this is something that we can all look forward to. Yeah.
And SPCA together with ACRES has actually released a white paper in June this year. We came up with 15 recommendations and proposing a review of the legislation. And we do think that legislation as a deterrent,
Yeah.
it's a very important element to stem animal cruelty. So we put up a comprehensive, I think in area 2 of our white paper,
Right.
a full list of suggested enhancements.
Yeah, that's great because if anyone has a say in this, definitely it should be the SPCA. You have enough experience and you've been seeing what's happening on the ground. Is this white paper available online?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, on the SPCA website as well as ACRES website.
Right.
We've actually published that for public review, and we've also engaged the authorities, including AVS and Ministry and Parks, to discuss how we can further enhance some of this.
That's that sounds like a fair bit of work has been done. But as usual, with white papers, there is a lot of groundwork to be covered after that, right? When you work with AVS, do you also, how does SPCA get involved in investigating animal cruelty cases or complaints actually?
Yeah, what happens is that when there are reports of cruelty coming into SPCA, we have a 24-hour hotline that's manned. And when we get reports of those, what we will do is we'll send our inspector down on site to assess the condition and gather evidence. Due to our limitations, unfortunately, because we lack the legal enforcement powers to actually enter or go further into this, sometimes we have to take back to NParks, AVS, for them to help take action on the more severe cases. We work closely with them. We have ongoing communications. We meet them very regularly for the animals. And in fact, we just had meetings recently to follow up on cases as old as March, dating back to March 24.
Great. Yeah. I guess it helps that I believe we don't have a statute of limitations for prosecuting prosecution cases.
Yeah.
So it helps that you can go back in time. But
And that's one of our
Yep.
recommendations in the white paper to give us some enforcement powers for the animals, because the pain here is that if you visit the site and you see that the animal is suffering,
yeah.
but yet we can't do anything about it. We have to fall back on the authorities to come and take next steps. And meanwhile, the animal is suffering.
Absolutely. So do you expect to work with AVS on issuing any public guidelines on what's welfare, what's neglect, what amounts to cruelty? Is that something on the cards?
Not at this moment. We have worked with AVS in releasing the recent advisory on not using aversive training devices on dogs.
Right.
We work with them on setting up and implementing the cat management framework. So we typically work with them on those framework policies. So no, we haven't had any,
Sure.
although we have some discussions around what the thing is that AVS would have to make sure that cases of cruelty are strictly defined before they can provide any advisory on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And to be able to do that, we have to see more cases being argued in court, being addressed, and we will come up with a better definition of what's cruelty, and that should help matters along. Anisa, I have some interesting questions on the scope of Section 42. So let's talk about culling of animals, the state euthanasia of animals. Do you think this is a form of this is an issue that could be addressed under the definition of cruelty? Is it legally justified? Would you have any thoughts on that?
I think this would have to be balanced between the reasons as to why the government is imposing culling. In this sense, it's for the protection of the societal welfare,
Right.
cleanliness as to welfare, hygiene purposes. And I think the important point to note is also how they go about culling this. If it's like a humane way of doing it, perhaps arguably it might not fall within the definition of cruelty under the Animal and Birds Act.
Yeah.
Because if it's a humane way, maybe, arguably, there might not be physical pain, there
Yep.
might not be fear caused.
Yes.
I
I would have to agree, and I believe that argument can be made that it goes both ways. If your animal is suffering enough, perhaps culling imposed through means that prevent the animal from suffering. So culling that is controlled and done through administered in an ethical manner may be something that doesn't necessarily amount to cruelty, right? Again, remains to be argued, but I think you tried your best with that. Thank you. So I'll give you something more straightforward. Does Section 42 include psychological abuse like confinement or excessive confinement or overfeeding? Do you think that could fall under Section 42?
So at the outset,
Yeah.
Section 42 and the Animals and Birds Act does not expressly mention psychological abuse like excessive confinement or overfeeding.
Yes.
But if these cause the animals pain and fear or cause the animals unnecessary pain and suffering, then this clause is broad enough to cover the psychological abuse caused as a result of excessive confinement or overfeeding.
And the definition of animal in itself, is there also something in the law that defines? I'm thinking it should cover our all sentient beings, maybe not wildlife.
Yeah.
Defense, right?
The definition of animal under the Act, so in law,
Yeah.
means any mammal or fish that includes any other living creature that is prescribed as an animal for the purposes of this Act.
Perfect. That's what I thought as well. And lastly, just an interesting question. If there was poison that is placed in a person's premises to get rid of pigeons or other creatures of the night, and a dog or a cat accidentally consumes this, do you think it would be captured under Section 42, or are we looking at something like duty of care, a complete accident, a case by accident that causes an animal to die, right?
I guess it would depend a lot on the facts.
Right.
For instance, where is this poison placed? Who placed it? Is it regulated? What type of poison?
Yep.
Before a case can be made out. Or
Correct.
whether it's neglect or cruelty.
Yeah, because Section 42 requires a mental intent
Yeah.
to impose the harm that is meant to be captured under the ambit of 42. So a situation like poison that is accidentally consumed, I think it remains questionable and probably a question to be taken up by the prosecutors. And
I believe that the typical use of poison by maybe rat poison or something, these are pest control measures.
Indeed.
And it is incumbent, and I think it is required of the pest controllers to be present and to clean up the poison after it's been used for a period of time and not leave it out there. So this is a requirement actually for pest control.
Pest control. So it's arguable that if someone doesn't follow these guidelines, right, that they have breached the duty of care towards other creatures, which nicely allows us to go into the next topic. We're going to talk about duty of care, but I want to leave our viewers as well as our panel with a parting thought. There was a recent case on animal cruelty where it was public prosecutor versus Lin Pengli Berry, and something the judge said really resonates with me, which is he echoes the words of Mahatma Gandhi and says that the greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated, right? So in the interest of time, I will be moving on to duty of care, but towards the end of the session, if there is some time, I'm going to be asking Anisa to share her insights on the particular case, right? So let's talk about neglect and abandonment and the hidden crisis, which is, I really think that tracks well with what Walter shared in the beginning as well in terms of the numbers when you talk about animal welfare and neglect, right? So there are different aspects to neglect, insufficient or inappropriate care, abandonment. So Anisa, could you explain the concept of duty of care in animal law? And what would be redress? How do you redress a situation where you find that a pet owner has abused? Do we go to the police, or is it something that has to be pursued in court as a civil case? Yeah.
Okay, so first on the definition of duty of care, this can be found at Section 41C of the ABA, the Animal and Birds Act, which sets out the standard of duty of care expected of pet owners. So including, the Act sets out first, providing adequate food and water daily. So for overfeeding and underfeeding that leads to health problems is a breach of this duty. And second, to provide adequate shelter to the animal. The animal must be housed in an environment that protects it from heat, rain, and injury. And of course, confinement in cramped or unsanitary cages can amount to neglect. And third, medical care. Owners must seek veterinary treatment for sickness or injury within a reasonable time. And so the definition of owners encompasses anyone being in charge of any animal and any person for the time being in any occupation of any building. This is the legal definition. This means that anyone with custody or control of the animals, not just legal ownership, and this will include pet groomers and businesses. So on to the second question, which is what redress we can do. I would believe as a layperson, first to call the police, call SPCA, and I think it's very important to document the evidence that you have if it is safe to do so. So take a photo, take a video of the suspect, the location, any accomplice, the car, take note of the car number plate detail, note any distinguishing features. And on the law enforcement side, ABS is the one that is the national authority responsible for enforcing animal welfare laws. And as what Walter has mentioned earlier, usually together with the SPCA, they can launch criminal investigations. And if a case is made out, they can prosecute the offender in court.
Okay, that's perfect. So it can be addressed through criminal laws or rather through the Animals and Birds Act,
Yes.
right? Okay, I think that was very clear as to what the section, what it encompasses in terms of duty of care towards animals. And I believe that it's precisely the situation that Walter mentioned earlier, the high-rise syndrome, where there isn't adequate protective mesh to ensure the safety of a cat or a dog. Would that be the kind of situation that perfectly falls under an example of a breach of duty of care under this section?
Yes, it would. Unfortunately, the current cat licensing does not require meshing. Unfortunately, there is a need to be vigilant and to ensure that the cat. So I think there's still a possibility that they can be covered in the duty of care, but meshing itself is not a requirement per se.
Okay. So if meshing might not be a precise requirement, but in your experience for neglect cases, have you seen how the police has handled such cases? Have these perpetrators, been charged for breaching a duty of care?
No, we haven't seen enough.
Right.
I think.
Right. Okay.
So and that's been a common bugbear from our perspective, because when we have potential adopters, wanting to adopt our cats, we put in a requirement for meshing of windows, and that's been a common issue that most of them do not want to do, and they end up buying instead of adopting.
Understand. Okay. So if you do see something that is not ideal, and the avenues as Anisa and yourself have shared is you can let the police know. People seem to be calling NParks a lot. Is NParks the appropriate government agency, or should they be calling AVS?
Well, technically, AVS falls within NPAC.
NParks, right?
They can also call SPCA.
Okay.
And as Anisa mentioned earlier, if they see witness any neglect, we would ask them to really document the situation, take photos, take videos, the location, the time, the animal's conditions, take note of those, and so that helps with investigations.
Okay.
And afterward, when they report the incident to SPCA or to AVS, we will follow up on the case. But even after that, we request that members of the public continue to stay vigilant. For example, cases where the animals are left confined to balconies for extended periods.
Right.
That can constitute a case of neglect, because the animal is exposed to harsh weather for extended periods of time. And in a recent case, Judge Hung has actually said so. But what that means is that there's a need to have extended monitoring of the situation.
Sure.
And the members of the public would do well to continue with that vigilance, so that we have enough evidence to nail the culprit.
Right. So what we are asking for is sufficient evidence to build up a case. There has to be some consistency and length of time. So if a complaint has been made to NParks, and as you said, NParks oversees AVS, another avenue would be to go to SPCA to let SPCA know. But if all agencies come back and say that we don't think this is serious enough to do anything, how do we round off such an issue? How can a member of public reconcile? What have you had grievances like that shared to SPCA?
Yeah, absolutely. We
Yes,
do. We do.
yes. What advice do you give them?
I think that at the end of the day, it's really about evidence gathering,
Okay.
and we would ask our feedback providers to continue with this evidence gathering, because the more evidence we have, stronger the case can be made against them. And AVS, I mean, to their credit, they have never shook from a case where it's a real obvious case of neglect. It's with the
Okay.
gray areas.
Gray
The
areas.
gray areas becomes challenging
Okay.
and takes up a lot of the resources to actually get to prosecution. And so I think we will require help from the feedback providers, members of public, really to continue to work with us to make the case a stronger one.
Okay. So gray areas, Walter, I'm going to ask Anisa, would you consider this a gray area if you know of your neighbor who's been abandoning cats once they are no longer as adorable as they used to be? Do you think this would be room for a complaint? There would be room for complaint if you are able to document them consistently doing this. Would you advise a member of public to call SPCA or NPACs?
Yes, definitely, especially if it's consistent, frequent, and you have evidence of it. Yep,
Yep.
I would encourage you to
Yes.
report this.
And as a pet owner myself, I do understand the pain that comes from not having issues addressed. But yeah, that there is a balance. Hopefully, if you do have 10 complaint cases that you escalate, hopefully 2 out of 10, even if there is some solution for a sentient being or fur animal out there, it's still a good solution. And that's where I guess members of public come up, they have a part to play, right? Um, and if you're interested to learn more about pet ownership matters as well, I want to get into this because adopting, purchasing animals when they're cute, whether they're puppies or kittens and all that, and then not being able to care for them as they're older. I've seen quite a bit of cases happen even in my own social circles post-COVID, right? And I think we can talk a bit about pet adoption in Singapore before we go into pet ownership, right? So for adoption matters, could you generally share your thoughts, Anisa and Walter? What are the avenues for adoption in Singapore?
Well, there you can go to the any of the animal welfare groups.
Yeah.
We have animals up for adoption, and the journey you come to SPCA will be one where we walk you through, and we sometimes public feels that the adoption process it's very laborious, very onerous, but what we really believe in is to ensure that we get a good match between the animal and the potential adopter. We want to make sure that they do not end up adopting and having to return the animal. So we go through a process where we want to make sure that there's a good fit. So sometimes it means multiple visits. Sometimes it means multiple sessions of counseling.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, our intent is not to have a one-size-fits-all, because different animals have different personalities.
Yep.
Different households have different practices, different lifestyles. And so the important thing is to find the right match to ensure that union is a forever union.
And why I'm addressing this right here is because really animal welfare and neglect seems to be the issue, the topic of the evening. And I think if there is a family or a person that wants to adopt a dog and give them that home, right? And I have the capacity to deliver that sort of care and to take care, is something we should encourage, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And
In fact, we say adopt, don't buy, because
yes,
the more you buy, the more you're encouraging more breeding.
correct.
And then breeding is a questionable business on its own.
So on that question of adoption, when you do adopt an animal and you have a license, you then become the legal owner of that animal, right? And under the law, we look at the pet owners, and the duty of care is imposed on them. So you did share, Anisa, that the duty of care extends to pet owners, which would include people who adopt animals and businesses as well,
That's correct.
right? Um, has there been a do you think there's a gray area with regard to adoption? So how would you legalize adoption? See, because what happens if I adopt a pet from someone and then they want it back? How do I legitimately prove that I am the pet owner? Uh, is that is there an argument based on circumstance, or is there some a way to formalize pet ownership?
If I were to see this from the point of law, yes, circumstantial evidence would be very important. The context, the agreement between parties, right? Because pet adoption is ultimately an oral or a written agreement. But I also understand that the previous owner will have to transfer over the legal ownership. If
The license.
correct? Yeah, the license. You have to cancel his, and then I will have to sign on my license. So that is the legal part as well.
Right. So ensuring that your dog gets microchipped and registering a license in their name are two steps I would also advise to, as a pet owner, that you immediately do if there's a dog you're adopting to avoid such cases where the original owner wants the dog back or the cat or the animal, right, in question. And if you're interested to learn more about pet ownership matters in Singapore, including what happens to pets in the event of a divorce, please watch the following webinar, and the YouTube link to the webinar will be shared in the chat function. You should have had the webinar pop up in your chat function. And before we move on to the third area I want to address, we talked a lot about duty of care vis-a-vis our furry friends and what we do in terms of how we offer them the best welfare, the best care. What about a duty of care to members of public? So a typical situation is when you bring your dogs out for a walk and they're on a leash. But what if they accidentally injure someone or does anything in the Animal and Birds Act cover cases like that? Or should that be handled under common law?
I believe that there are avenues under common law as well. For instance, negligence will be able to cover this, the tort of negligence. The Animals and Birds Act concerns more primarily with the animal itself as well as the welfare of society vis-a-vis animals, for example, preventing the spread of diseases per se. But from my understanding, if your pet, which under law is defined as a property, causes damage to another person, then there are avenues under tort law.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that as well, Anisa. I think that when we talk about duty of care, right, we would look at the circumstance. It is advisable to always leash your pets. If you enter a public park that has a sign that obviously says your pet must be leashed, and if you do not, then there's a better case made out for negligence in such a situation towards another member of the public. Your dog might still be leashed and you might not be able to control your pet. And if they do harm someone else, again, there is still a cause for negligence. It doesn't matter that the dog was leashed. And there are certain breeds, I believe, right, Walter, like the iconic German Shepherd and Rottweilers that must always be muzzled in public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but having said that, I think it is important for people to understand that dogs or animals typically do not just go around biting.
Absolutely.
They are reacting. They're reacting to a stimulus. So you might have accidentally done something that came to them as a sign of aggression, and so they are reacting to a stimulus. And so if you have your dog leash or you have your dog properly trained and then have a good communication with the dog, it should not be an issue typically.
Yeah, typically. But the people getting bitten always have another story to tell. So,
Sure, but
Yes.
that arose out of a misunderstanding of
Correct.
how they should work
Yeah.
with the dog. Yeah.
Definitely. So as a pet owner of one very large dog and one tiny one, I literally get people avoid me when I bring her walking. They run the other way and they give me this look of utter trepidation. They're like, actually, some look at me in a very disgusted way. Why are you housing this monster? Right? And then I was like, no, I rehomed her. So I am doing her good, right? But yeah, but we do have to be responsible, I guess. Definitely, absolutely, especially when there are children around. Yeah. And before we go to raising the bar on building a future, right, and a more compassionate society for animals, I guess a question to both Walter and Anisa, but more directly to Walter, the white paper that you mentioned, does that? And to be honest, I have not seen the white paper, and I would love to do that after the session today. Has any law been considered to ban or to restrict pet sales for profit, given the amount of abandonment cases?
Yeah, and one of the biggest problem that has proliferated recently is really online sales of animals. Online sales of animals, it's very difficult to nail exactly because they just move, and you can clamp one side down and the next one just pops up somewhere, and it's very hard to also get proof of transactions because they typically want to meet up and do this offline. And the other big problem is the notion that you can, buy the small little cute ones, like little terrapins or little hamsters,
Yes.
and then after that, you think that you just need a small cage for that.
Yes.
It's actually not true. Actually, putting a hamster in a small cage, or the cage may look beautiful, the hamster is still confined within a very restricted space, and that is actually not good for the hamster. So unfortunately, because of the online proliferation, many animals are actually purchased and after that they get abandoned. So we, in our white paper, has actually proposed that we do not allow any such transactions for people under 16. But then you say, yeah, the parents buy it on their behalf.
Yeah.
So we totally believe that we need to have more control, tighter rules, tighter laws around online sales.
Online sales. That's an interesting take. And do you see reptiles being part of online sales as well?
Exotic animals.
Exotic
actually.
animals.
And there's an area that ACRES would have been, the Wildlife Act would have been, actually the Wildlife Act would ban such sales of
Right,
exotic
right.
animals.
So, so they are covered under the Wildlife Act and not the Animal and Birds Act.
No.
Right,
Yeah, the Wildlife
right,
Act.
the Wildlife Act. Okay. So, and again, the Wildlife Act comes under the purview of NParks.
Yes,
Okay. So complaints with regard to handling of reptiles should go to NParks.
absolutely.
Okay. That's
And in fact, any member of the public who comes across such sites should quickly escalate that matter to us or to ACRES or the NParks and have that site closed down.
and so on this topic of sales and breeding, and it was interesting. I had a breeder tell me that my dog ordinarily would have had her tail cut off to make her look more aggressive if she had been put up for sale through a breeder, right? Do you see that? Of course, I didn't. I was like, what? The tail is the best part. But do you see that often, like castration of animals or ripping of feathers before sales and
Well, we haven't seen much of those cases
okay.
with our reports.
Right. So that is, but if it does happen, and as we've been saying throughout the session, again, it would be to tell the police, report to SPCA, go to
Absolutely.
NParks, and helping build a case with photo evidence or video evidence. I know it sounds a lot of work, but it's, if you are really bothered about it, I guess that's something we can do if we see injustice. Okay. So now, let's just take a step from the legalities at hand for a bit, right? We will have time, some time at the end to address more of the questions that are coming in. But let's look at what role should compassion and empathy play in shaping our animal welfare laws. Walter, what do you think the biggest misconceptions are about animal welfare, and how do you think we can educate pet owners and the community at large?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions about animal welfare is thinking that all we need to do is provide the basic, like food and water and some shelter. The reality is actually quite different.
Right.
The reality is we believe in, and in our white paper we've actually listed that the 5 domains of animal, the need for proper nutrition, the need for proper environment, the need for proper health care, and behavioral care, as well as the mental state. We believe that these 5 domains encompass all the needs for a sentient being,
Yeah.
and so that misconception that they just need the basics, it's led to a lot of actions that are not, in the best interest of the animals. For example, like I mentioned about hamsters being left in a cage. We think that the cage is beautiful, the hamster is cute, and we just let him buy that small little thing and put him aside. But actually, the hamsters need more than just that small space.
Exactly. So the question is, how do we classify suffering, and how broad the definition of suffering is, right?
Yeah.
So we're not talking about the act of cruelty here, but we're talking about understanding it from the animal's perspective.
Absolutely.
What is suffering to them, right?
That's right.
It's like trapping a border collie in a tiny condo unit when they are meant to roam. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I like to think of it that in a common sense way that if you put a dog out on a balcony all day,
Yeah.
you ask yourself, do you want to live on a balcony all day yourself? If you don't, then maybe the dog shouldn't.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's how I look at it.
That's a great way of looking at it, right? And on that topic about education, I heard you loud and clear on the white paper. Is there a code of animal welfare on pet owners for pet owners?
Yes,
Yeah.
there is a code of animal welfare. In fact, they have a code of animal welfare for both pet owners as well as for pet businesses.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I think what the code does is it only stipulates some minimum standards, some very minimum standards. If you look at the code of animal welfare, it talks about it uses very general terms, so it's not an ideal standard. But having said that,
Right.
if you fail to meet the code, that minimum standards, you may be prosecuted. But again, like I said, the standards listed in there are very, very minimal.
So this code was drafted by the government agency?
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, consultation with
In
a group
consultation.
of
Okay.
experts. Yeah.
Right. So if you were not to comply with something contained in the code, it is likely that a case can be made out for cruelty or neglect.
Yep.
Okay. Is this code available online?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
On the AVS website,
Okay.
NParks, you will see both codes for pet owners as well as for pet businesses.
Okay. That's helpful to understand in terms of education, right? Or at least a reference document.
Yeah, and the one for pet owners is very readable. It's
Yeah.
got infographics, so I encourage all pet owners to actually read them. Unfortunately, I think most do not read them. So I do encourage everybody to read that.
So yes, so the two reading materials for tonight, the white paper as well as the code, right? And if you are interested, or over the weekend, what I found interesting was, Walter, what you said. Think from the perspective of the animal, whether it's to gauge what comprises suffering or what comprises neglect. So on that note, so this question is to Anisa now. Do you think that the laws need to be okay? For my understanding of pets, that they are property, right? Do you think anything needs to be said to give an animal a legal personality? I mean, this is a far-reaching question, but could that possibly help one day? Like giving a pet a legal personality. So you look at it from their perspective. You're forced to as a community.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct. Under the law, animals are currently viewed as a property
Yeah.
because they belong to the owners.
Correct.
It's like an asset when you have to divide during divorce, for instance,
Yeah.
in my line of work, we also have to decide, okay, the animal goes to which spouse.
Correct.
But it's a bit different in terms of like a property per se, because the laws under the Animals and Birds Act and the Wildlife Act recognize this, because they recognize that the animals are sentient, they feel things, and that's why there are laws in place to protect them. So while yes, they are a type of property for practical purposes under the legal purposes,
Correct.
in terms of the protection they have, is a bit different from like a table per se.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where is it articulated, this concept of pet being property? Is it in the definition under the Animal and Birds Act? Or is it common law?
I would think it's under common law.
Okay.
Yeah.
As I understand it, the courts not only look at who registered the animal, who owns a license, but also looks at who is more attached to the animal, as in the animal has been taken care of mainly by person A or B, and in terms of the medical bills or feeding and all that kind of things, the court recognizes that, I believe.
Yes, that's correct. Increasingly, our courts are recognizing that because there's greater focus on animal welfare, and we try to bring this to the court's attention. So we want
Yeah.
to fight for our clients. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I keep using the phrase common law, what I'm saying is these concepts have been debated and fleshed out in judgments or court decisions. The reference to animals as property, or so if you're looking for a specific legal document that spells out that animals are property, you're probably not going to find that, right, Anisa? But the Animal and Birds Act is available on the Singapore Statutes online website, because I see a couple of questions coming in asking us where we can find the legislation, right? So the Singapore Statutes online, you just Google it, right? And it's available for public use. And then you go and look for the act under A. It's convenient. It's under Animals and Birds Act. You're going to find it in the first page. So, right? So that's where you go if you want to know more about the law. Okay. And so this concept of property is interesting, which is why unfortunately, if your dog gets attacked in a fight at the dog park and your pet dies, okay, this is the worst case scenario. For the owner, their child has left them. But if you took the perpetrator, I mean the owner of the dog that injured your animal, the court's going to tell you that you're probably only going to get back the value of the dog or lesser, right? The compensation is usually not proportional to the pain you're feeling. So that is how things are. And I think we are still far off as, not just in Singapore, but even in other countries, dogs are still viewed as property. So that's maybe someday in the future that would change. But since we are looking at them as animals, right? Not just dogs, but animals as property. Are you aware, Anisa, of any clear legal guidelines with regard to euthanasia, or when it's time to say bye to our fur animals and our family?
Right now, no specific statute in Singapore explicitly governs euthanasia, but I'm aware that there is a code of ethics for veterinarians which provides some guidelines for the veterinarians, and I can quote these guidelines out. So first, the vets must consider euthanasia to prevent unnecessary suffering, but prior treatment options must be considered as appropriate. So basically, the vet has to act in the animal's best interest. The vet has to obtain informed consent by the owner in writing if possible, and the vet is entitled to refuse a request for euthanasia if he does not deem it necessary. And finally, the vet is entitled to terminate the vet-client-patient relationship if the vet's recommendation of euthanasia is not accepted by client. But I must point out that very recently, just a week ago, the Minister for State and National Development announced that public consultations on a veterinary practice bill are underway, and these consultations will conclude by December. So from what I've read, this new law will establish a veterinary council to manage complaints and set professional standards, and a registration framework for vets, including cases of misconduct or negligence, not just limited to euthanasia.
That's great. That's a step in the right direction to regulate how this happens. And I think it's welcome, right, to see this happening. Okay. Let's come to this this idea of pets being property is a sensitive one, right? So, Walter, with regard to pets being castrated, right? As pet owners, they make the decision with regard to sterilization or to spaying their dogs. Uh, and they get routinely castrated before sale of dogs. In some cases, for a few reasons. My gut feel is that this technically currently probably doesn't come under the idea of cruelty or neglect because we make the decisions for our fur animals. What do you think?
Well, we think that sterilization is not a bad thing.
Right.
And of course, we think that you need to sterilize them. You should sterilize them only after some age, not when they're too young.
Yes.
But having said that, if you choose not to, the law allows it.
Yep.
The licensing fees are different.
Yes.
But you are not allowed to breed them for sales.
Yeah. So personally, I feel it's the decision boils down to the owner, the pet owner, as to if they want to keep their pets comfortable. Because if you have a male dog that is not castrated, the dog has its needs, as do female dogs, and that's another kind of suffering we also have to consider. And as a pet owner, when my dogs are young, if I got my my male dog sterilized when he was really young, and we try to do it in an ethical way as possible for their. So it's a balance. It's a balance really, because I want to raise this. While sterilization is viewed as cruel by a lot of animal lovers, we have to look at the context. For instance, in India now, the Supreme Court has been put in a position to pass a law where there's going to be mass genocide of street dogs.
Yeah.
Right. And that's because a strategy has not been adopted in terms of sterilization and dealing with such street dogs, not strays, but street dogs. They literally live and home themselves in the streets. So it is really a balance. I wouldn't say it's a right or wrong answer, but until such time that our dogs have legal personalities, or our animals, right, our cats and all that, we try to do it in the least cruel way possible, right? And that's my thought on that. Okay, so one last thing, Walter, for you is that before we go into the questions that are coming in, is SPCA, I feel, is doing the angel's work with regard to taking care of our animals. And you have a lot on your plate, right? You're not a profit-driven organization. And so I'm not going to sit here and say, SPCA, it's your duty to educate. Can you please churn out mailers and publicity materials? And I'm not here to speak for SPCA. I'm perfectly neutral, right? But if one wanted to learn more about adoption, one wanted to apprise themselves of what they can do with SPCA, like aside from the website, can you share with us, like, can they come down to the center? Where is it located now? And is an appointment required, or can they walk in? Yeah.
Sure. We are now located at 50 Sungai Tengah Road. That's just right next to Warren Golf and Country Club. So you can't miss us. For anyone interested, they should give us a call, make an appointment. Unfortunately, we're not able to have people walk in except for our adoption drive Saturdays. But they can give us a call, make an appointment, and we'll have a counselor to speak with them, understand their needs, bring them, and walk them through the whole adoption process. And not only that, we believe that in order for this adoption to be successful, we do pre and post adoption follow-ups.
Right.
So we want to make sure that the whole transitional journey is a pleasant one for both the animals as well as for the adopter. So make an appointment with us anytime. We'll see to it.
Thank you. Thank you, Walter. Thank you, Anisa. So the three areas we've talked about cruelty, we've talked about duty of care, we've talked about general empathy, compassion, building a better society, given us a lot to think about. And I think it's time now to consider some of the questions that are coming in. And a general note to our audience. If you want certain questions to appear, try to upvote them because we have 20 minutes left. So I'm going to go based on questions that are in order of descending number of votes, right? So the more votes you have, you're going to get your question heard. Okay. Now, the first one. You cannot adopt a child without approval of MSF after extensive reviews. Oh, I know this pain point because I personally wanted to adopt when before marriage and after marriage. And yes, it is a pain point. Unfortunately, pets are traded like commodities. So now, I guess when they say trade, it basically means you buy a puppy or you buy a kitten and then you outgrow it. The dog or the cat or the terrapin outgrows you and then you just abandon or you trade or you give it off to the next person, right? You did mention, Walter, that the white paper is addressing some of these issues, but do you think it needs to be tightly regulated? Do you think you need to have a license before you sell, or there should be laws specifically addressing this?
I think that there are many reasons why people give up their pets.
Yep.
And we have to be cognizant that one of the reasons could be that they were impacted financially, they lost the job, or there could be some circumstantial reasons that led to them having to give it up.
Right.
So I don't think that we should, in those situations, we should maybe help them, and we tell them, come to SPCA, come to any of the animal welfare groups.
Yep.
We'll gladly help them manage the situation. In fact, SPCA has a community animal clinic. We are the only one with a community animal clinic. And if you find vet costs too expensive, vet expenses too expensive, and you can't afford it, come to us and we'll help. Don't let your pet suffer because of that. So I think if we are cognizant of those situations, then we have to also help these people so that, with their pets. Really.
Absolutely. So in terms of enforcement, I think there's something proactive, right? So there's something where we look at enforcement in two angles. One is we preempt what's going to happen, we try to prevent it. And another way is to react later, reactive or proactive, right? So given the resources we have and where we're going at currently, I think what we're looking at is a reactive way of handling things. So we offer help through non-profit organizations if owners are unable to take care of their animals. And another way is to react when you see an abject case of cruelty or abandonment. And that in some cases helps to deal with the fact that they're being traded like commodities, right? I think we're still quite far off as a society where we're going to regulate every chain along the line of succession. So we're probably not there yet, where we are going to be able to regulate how animals are being traded, right? But maybe one day we'll get there. But that's a great question. Thank you, Walter. So, Anisa, so this is to you. I believe earlier when you talked about the upcoming vet guidelines, did you mention that if a pet owner rejects euthanasia, the vet has the option of terminating the relationship with the client? And if that is the case, do you think the vet should be required to report such cases before they abandon the client relationship? Or maybe you want to clarify what you meant.
So there's no law in place yet because the bill is still a bill and it's still undergoing consultation, public consultation. What I had mentioned was in the Code of Ethics, which is also not a law, it's a code, which is something like a guideline, whereby the vet is entitled to terminate the vet-client-patient relationship if the vet's recommendation of euthanasia is not accepted by the client. So first of all, at the outset, the vet can only make a recommendation for euthanasia if the vet deems that this is in the best interest of the pet and after already trying prior treatments.
Okay.
Whether the vet is required to report this, right now, I do not see a need for it.
Because they could anyway under the animal and they could anyway report the case if they think an animal is being abused. right?
That is correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that the vet is doing his due diligence, nothing wrong with the vet, whatever the vet is saying.
Okay.
I'm thinking of like a recording, like a vet reports to the authorities.
Yeah.
And it comes out as a record log.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do not think that there's a requirement for this because ultimately what I'm trying to think of what impact, what benefit that this serves. Yeah,
Right.
which I can't think
Right.
off my
You
head right
you
now.
can't you can't really identify unless there's a case of cruelty or
Yeah, correct.
obvious harm.
Mm.
You don't see why a vet would do that. Yeah. Okay. Um, this question is interesting, and I want to address that personally. It's about naming and shaming. So they mentioned that, okay, for instance, for a list of bankrupts, we have a publicly accessible list. Shouldn't there be a publicly accessible list of pet abusers as well? Right? Interesting question. But I believe as a society, we don't have the name and shame approach yet, even for criminals or even sex offenders or of that nature yet, right? And I believe if we haven't taken that approach yet in the interest, I mean, there are a few reasons for that. We want people to be rehomed in society as well, and we don't want to name and shame them, right, when it comes to criminal offenders. So I think it will be quite a while away before we name and shame pet abusers. But is that something you've ever considered, Walter? Because I saw you nodding your head in in a very enthusiastic fashion.
Well, our white paper recommends actually that the sentencing to ban them from any, if you're in pet business, if you've done something cruel to animals, you should be banned from pet business for a longer period of time.
Okay.
So also we do recommend lengthening the bans, increasing the quantum of fines.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think I don't think we've talked about naming and shaming yet.
Right.
I hope we don't have to go down there.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope as a society we are better than that.
Absolutely.
And let's see where it goes, right? How about laws to dictate minimum living spaces or minimum pet BMI guidelines? When it was very interesting. I send my dog for boarding sometimes. When I'm traveling, right? I want to make sure that she's okay, and I went through a few borders before I found one that suitable, and I met a golden retriever in the house, bordering on 70 kilos. And she could barely walk. Actually, she was young. She was only 4 kilos. So the way 4 years of age, sorry. So the way apparently the pet owners had managed her energy and her risk for being a golden was to feed her. So just keep feeding her to keep her quiet, right? And my heart did ache because when the dog grows older is when the but what do you think about that? Because if there was a minimum law, frankly, I would like to have a minimum law for parents, actually, not to overfeed their children first, to be honest, in the interest of all the poor kids that have to go through tough club. I don't know whether they still call it trim and fit club, but it used to in my age. That's something I would do first. Yeah. So what do you think? Maybe Anisa, you can say because you're a pet mom as well.
Yeah, I think that is something very close to my heart.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether it's realistic to impose a minimum law, especially given that BMI itself may not be the most useful or telling indicator. I think there are many more indicators that we have to consider when we look at a pet's health. But increasingly, I've noticed a lot of overweight pets, and these are considered by the public to be cute and acceptable. So yeah, I adopted a golden retriever recently, and he's around 30 kg, which to me, he seems fine, energy levels high, but a lot of people are telling me that he's very skinny. So I think, but my vet says he's fine. So I think that there is this misconception. I think laws alone are not really going to solve this issue, but more so towards education.
Yeah.
How to tell if your pet is within the healthy weight range. Not just BMI per se, right? I think you feel the ribs, you look at energy levels, it's appetite levels, for instance. Yeah.
So I would add that the Code of Animal Welfare actually has this thing called a body condition score.
Excellent.
Where
Okay.
it they educate the public on how do you see a pet is underweight, overweight, or just nice. So when you bring your pet to the vet, they will also make the assessment for you. So this body condition score is a good guide. Good guide.
Yeah, good.
So I encourage everybody to read.
Yeah, it's the waist to hip ratio, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how I gauge as well for my dogs, just to know that they're healthy. It's also good to educate yourself to know that you're doing them the right
Exactly.
thing, right? Yeah, that's excellent from both of you. Thank you. This question, okay. Shouldn't sellers be penalized if a sold pet is abandoned? I mean, what if you sell them for profit and then they are subsequently abandoned? So, Walter, you did say that we are looking at licensing of pet sellers, and there are some controls around that. But ultimately, if I have sold a dog as a pet seller and then the purchaser then abandons the dog, okay, in a perfect world, I would have done some due diligence and screening. But I'm a seller, it's for profit, which is why we say adopt, because adoption agencies do profiling, screening, and due diligence. And they go over to check whether the premises are suitable for the dog. Do you already have a current dog on premise? Are all your family members, including your domestic worker, if you have one, your foreign domestic worker, are they comfortable with the dog? Because we don't want them abusing the dog when you leave them with the dog like 15 hours a day whilst you're busy working to take care of your dog and your family, right? So I think probably not there yet in terms of regulating. Because generally, even when companies do businesses, we don't go behind the intent of the way the business is conducted, right? So it's not an ideal answer. I don't think that's the answer this person is looking for, but I guess that's the lay of the land for now.
Having said that, if you
Yes.
adopt a dog from SPCA or any other animal welfare groups, there's the guideline now really says that if you decide to give up that animal, the animal welfare group is obligated to take that animal back from.
Mm,
So another reason to go adopt, not buy.
yeah. I guess that's our play for adoption, right? To encourage adoption. But adoption comes with its challenges as well. But really, if you can do it, do consider it, right? And that's what and there's a general question here about when will humans be mature enough to respect nature and the environment before it's too late, right? And I think that is an ongoing struggle we have, whether it's with global warming or respecting the environment, respecting each other, and respecting animals, right? So the thing is, you can require a justice of peace to marry a couple. So it's interesting, this question from this the member of audience says, okay, you need a justice of peace before you can marry, but you don't need an official registrar or someone to officiate the trading of animals. But people who have married legally or unofficially can also abuse each other when things go to shreds. So there is no, I will assure you that there is no certainty of treating each other. It's what's within you is what will come out even in the worst situation. And I think how you treat your enemy speaks far greater than how you treat someone in the best of times, right? So, and okay. Walter, can the public use one service to report on animal abuse issues? Does NPACs come under one service?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's useful. And for those who don't know, one service, I believe, is this application that allows you to take pictures and submit issues around your estate that will directly go to the agency for to be addressed. Okay? So now, this question. Why doesn't NPACs have the right to enter the premise to check on an animal abuse situation? So, Anisa, under the Animal and Birds Act, I believe there is a part on powers of search. Are there powers of search or regulatory powers to allow?
Yeah, there is powers of search and seizure. The enforcement powers
Right.
under the Animals and Birds Act.
Okay.
So, yes, an authorized officer or police officer may enter and examine the premises if there's suspicion of animal cruelty, neglect, that sort of thing.
Is there a minimum level of is there a minimum threshold that has to be met? As in, does the officer need a warrant, or do they have to be satisfied that there is an incident of abuse?
The threshold would be for seizure,
Okay.
reason to believe that any offense under the Act has been committed.
Okay, so they have to be able to justify that they believe an offense has been committed, and I think that's where the problem lies. Having enough evidence on hand to be satisfied that an offense under the Act has been reasonably committed under the standards of criminal law, right?
Yeah.
Before you enter.
Mm.
Yeah. Which I think is absent in many cases, which may be why there aren't as many cases of entry and retrieving animals and things like that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going into the last 5 minutes of our session today. So I'm looking for certain feel good questions that will leave us with bittersweet memories. Now, generally, I am pro adoption, right? So what happens with mongrels or Singapore specials? They are allowed to be housed in public housing, right? Walter?
Yes.
And what happens when there are issues with injuries or excessive nuisance or annoyance caused by these animals? I suppose they would have to be handled in the same way you would any other pet, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I say, I mean, generally, Singapore specials are really just like any other dogs. There's nothing different. You know, they all have their own personalities, they have their own behavioral traits. All it needs is for the owner to be aware and to address those needs. So I think if the needs are addressed properly and done well, there's no different from any other dogs.
Okay. So I hope that answers the question. I guess it's just it boils down to, I think, whether it's HDB or a condo or landed property, it really boils down to how you handle the animal in question, right? And
Typically, training is to train the owner, not train the dog,
exactly,
so that they understand the dog better.
absolutely. And general questions on insurance, right? Should pet owners buy insurance against illness or abandonment? Absolutely. I have both my dogs insured. Do it sooner rather than later, because vet bills do hike up, and there's no sure 100% coverage kind of thing for insurance. I've looked through I've compared all the insurance policies available for pets, right? But there is decent coverage, so absolutely do cover your pet against illness. But I don't think there's any insurance against abandonment, right? The only insurance is your moral compass. So, okay. Now, I have a couple of minutes left. Now, terrapins, Walter, terrapins are also covered as animals, right? And again, same process would apply if you see terrapins or creatures of that nature being abused or being subject to abandonment. Take evidence, photo evidence, video evidence. And on that topic, going to the last question for the day, what we are here really today is we're here to look at how to address these issues. And I think one thing we talked about a lot is, who do you go to? Who do you complain? How do you address the complaints? And we want to gather evidence and we want to substantiate the complaints. So when we do take videos and photos as lay people, one very interesting question here, if you do capture the pet owner or their family, or is it illegal? So I'm going to jump in just from my data privacy perspective, because that's what my background is, right? If a ordinary person, a member of the public, is taking a picture, the good news is the privacy laws do not cover you, because we regulate organizations, not people. So I can take a photo if I have to of that situation, and if I inadvertently capture someone in the background, it's not per se illegal, but I'm not asking you to shove the camera in their face and go into their personal space, right? That I'm not advocating. So Anisa and Walter, any thoughts on that? Do you get a lot of videos, Walter, where there are people in the background? Can't be avoided, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And Anisa,
And if it's for legal reporting purposes, I'm pretty sure that's fine as well.
Yeah. So that was great. And so we've come to the end of the session. We're sadly out of time. And I want to personally thank Anisa. She came on board to join us for this panel just in the past week. And I must really thank her for the time she has taken to prepare. And a lot of the questions were out of left field, actually. She had not prepared for them. So thank you for handling them so expertly. I appreciate it. Walter, your perspective was humbling, and I think it would resonate with animal lovers that have attended the session today. And I'll just quickly wrap up and say that my takeaway is that understanding animal welfare isn't just for lawyers, it's for every citizen who believes in the dignity, empathy, and the justice for all sentient beings. Any quick takeaways before we wrap up today? Anisa?
For me, Singapore is still a work in progress when it comes to building a compassionate, inclusive, yet orderly society, one where responsible pet ownership and respect for community space goes hand in hand under the law. And I hope that pet owners and aspiring pet owners fully recognize that pets are very expensive, time-consuming, and very stressful commitments, but the immeasurable joy that they bring into our lives make it completely worth it.
Yeah. I second that. And Walter, anything to?
Well, my message will be that animal cruelty is multifaceted and it needs support of everybody. It's not just a legislation issue about the law. It's also about the community, about the welfare groups, about all the support. And if you see neglect or you see welfare issues or cruelty issues, report them, actively participate in getting the culprit under the law, or otherwise, maybe just a matter of education. Just give us a call, give SPCA a call. Sometimes it's out of ignorance. We will counsel, we will speak with the owners. But sometimes it's just the perpetrators are just wrong, in which case the law becomes a very important tool to put them off. So I would say we need the support of everybody in the community. We need the support of people in the government. We need the support of our lawyers to get a really good legislation going.
Thank you, Walter, and for all the work SPCA has done in that regard. And it's my pleasure to have served on this session with you today. And with that, we have to bring our Q&A session to a close, as well as the whole series of 15 webinars for Law Awareness Weeks at CDC 2025. I did try to address the bulk of the questions that came in, but if I missed out your question, it was not intentional. And I would strongly suggest that you go to Singapore Statutes Online, find the legislation Animals and Birds Act. You also have the code on animal welfare that's available online, as well as the white paper that Walter from SPCA mentioned, and see whether you can find your answers there. And we hope that we have helped you level up your legal literacy across the various topics that you can see before you now on the slide. Now, if you missed any of the webinars and you wish to catch the ones you missed, the recording of the webinar will be made available on Pro Bono SG, the YouTube channel handled by Pro Bono SG, 2 weeks from today. The previous Law at CDC webinars will be available on the same channel, and you can check out the link shared in the chat function or scan the QR code. Now, if you miss clicking on any of the links shared during today's webinar, do not worry. All links will also be provided in a follow-up email tomorrow that will be sent to you. Do look out for it. At the end of this webinar, a survey form will pop up your screen for your completion, and we appreciate your comments, right? After today's sharing session from our panelists, if you find that you do require some legal guidance on your issues, you could write to help, HELP, at probono.sg. And lastly, I'd like to thank Anisa and Walter for sharing their knowledge and experience. I want to thank Pro Bono SG, in particular Kelvin, who has helped us behind the scenes even today, and Rachel as well from Pro Bono SG for all the assistance. And thank you all for joining us today. And we hope to see you in next year's Law Awareness Weeks at CDC. So thank you for a great session, guys. And signing out until next year, if they'll have me. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.